Hello there, this is Al24 News. I'm Abdurrahim Kashur, streaming live from Algiers. And coming up next in our program. Positive test rate in Australia hits 20% high as Omicron cases surge. Hospitalization climbed to more than 1,000 in New South Wales for first time since Omicron variant emerged as number of PCR tests drops down. A major fire broke out at South Africa's seat of parliament in Cape Town early Sunday, sending a thick column of smoke into the sky, threatening the National Assembly building. Flooding in Oman, triggered by heavy rainfall that began on New Year's Eve, has killed 6 people and left several towns completely cut off. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said in his New Year message that he wants to see an end to the conflict in the east of the country. Hello, welcome those who are today's headlines. New Australia COVID-19 cases dipped on Sunday as testing slowed over holiday weekend, but remained well over 30,000, and hospitalization rose further in New South Wales as concerns grow about potential strains on the national health system. The UK has a new record numbers of daily cases over the festive period. Rising cases numbers have led to a large number of self-isolating and being unable to go to work. This has particularly affected industries when staff are unable to work from home. Boris Johnson has called on ministers to draw up robust contingency plans to tackle coronavirus related to staff absence, threatening to disrupt UK businesses and supply chains over the coming weeks. The outbreak of COVID-19 and the new variant is still being the hot potato in the whole world. New statistics and death record in this report by Zara Farjani.
COVID-19 is continuing to spread around the world, with nearly 300 million confirmed cases and more than 5 million deaths across almost 200 countries. Bangladesh on Saturday registered 4 more coronavirus-related deaths and 370 new cases in the last 24 hours. The new cases were detected after testing 15,214 samples around the country. The Philippines started 2022 with 3,617 new COVID-19 cases. The government will tighten coronavirus restrictions in the capital Manila over fears of an exponential growth in cases due to the highly contagious Omicron variant. New York delivered a previously unthinkable level of new COVID cases on Saturday, when the governor's daily report tallied 85,476 positive results in a single day. France became the 6th country in the world to report more than 10 million COVID-19 infections since the outbreak of the pandemic. Health authorities reported 219,126 new confirmed cases in a 24-hour period. French authorities cut the isolation period for fully vaccinated people who test positive to 7 days from 10 days to prevent disruptions in industries for lack of staff. This isolation could be lifted after 5 days in case of a negative test.
Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni announced plans to lift COVID-19 restrictions in January that had been in place since March 2020, including reopening schools, bars and nightclubs, citing rising vaccination rates. The East African nation has imposed some of Africa's toughest restrictions in September. Some measures were eased, including allowing the resumption of education for universities and other post-secondary institutions.
The sports events to be allowed to open with the SOPs, they will have to announce them. The Minister of Education and the ones of culture, they will have to announce the details. Stadiums, are you going to have full stadium? They will give you the details. Number 3, pre-primary, primary and secondary schools will be opened for learners starting with the 10th of January 2021. The Minister of Education and Sports and the Minister of Health to work out applicable SOPs and communicate them. 4, the performing arts, concerts, bars, and discos will be open 2 weeks after the opening of the schools.
The UAE announced on Saturday a travel ban for all its citizens who are not vaccinated against the virus starting from January 10th. In a statement, the National Emergency Crisis and Disaster Management Authority stressed on the necessity of obtaining the booster doses to vaccinate citizens based on the national protocol for booster doses. The decision has excluded some medically excused people who were unvaccinated. A major fire broke out in South Africa Parliament building in Cape Town early this morning. Firefighters were present at the building as large flames and a huge column of smoke were seen at around 7:30 a.m. local time. The roof has caught fire and the National Assembly building is also on fire. A spokesperson for the City Emergency Service told AFP. It is worth mentioning that no people have been injured in the fire, as it was reported by security guards. Minister of Public Works Patricia de Lille spoke to media outside the Parliament. She says that it wasn't the National Assembly that cut a light, but the old Assembly.
All matters will be investigated. The police have started to investigate. The forensic department is here. Public Works is here. We're all together. But for now, what is important is for us, we can't tell you exactly where the fire started, but we can tell you where we've.
The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, the world's largest free trade agreements, came into existence on Saturday, boosting vitally into multilateralism and free trade amid the COVID-19 pandemic and the global economic recovery. Sid Islam on What's Follow.
The world's largest free trade agreement, signed by 15 Asian Pacific countries, entered into force on Saturday after more than a decade of negotiations. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership came into effect for Australia, Brunei, Cambodia, China, Japan, Laos, New Zealand, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, while February 1st it will do so far for South Korea, Myanmar, Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia still need to approve it.
The entry into force of the RCEP will provide a boost to the trade and business ties between Singapore and the RCEP parties.
One noticeable omission is the United States, which withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a massive trade deal that also includes countries in the region and has the potential to provide commercial advantages for Beijing in Asia-Pacific. RCEP addresses trade in products and services, the digital economy, intellectual property, and trade disputes, among other concerns, but does not include labor rights or environmental regulations. The overall gross domestic product of the signatory countries is estimated to be $26.2 trillion, or 30% of the world GDP. The agreement encompasses around 25% of global trade and a market of approximately 2.3 billion people, almost 30% of the world's population, in the world's fastest growing economic area. According to a study from the Asian Development Bank, predicted that the RCEP will contribute to post-pandemic economic recovery. By 2030, it will increase members' incomes by 0.6%, adding $245 billion annually to regional income and 2.8 million jobs to regional employment. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations and other countries with which the group already had free trade agreements began discussions on the RCEP in 2012. Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea are among the countries participating. However, India pulled out of the deal in 2019 to protect its market and workers over fears of being flooded with cheaper products mainly from China.
The United States Geological Survey said an earthquake hit China this afternoon and struck the border between Yunnan and Sichuan provinces. The quake led to the injection of 22 people in the city of Lijian, and the China Earthquake Network Center later measured the magnitude at 5.5 with a depth of 10 kilometers. The epicenter was 150 kilometers away from Lijian in Yunnan province, the USGS said. Flooding in Oman, triggered by heavy rainfall that began on New Year's Eve, has killed 6 people and left several towns completely cut off. Oman TV reported on Saturday that a man was found dead in his vehicle after he tried to cross a wadi in Smail province. The towns of Liwa, Suhar, Samail, Sur and Wihab were cut off when the country received more than 72 millimeters of rainfall. In his annual New Year message, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed defiance amid a buildup of Russian forces on the other side of the country's border with Russia. He also said that the main goal in 2022 is to end this tension between Russia and Ukraine. Marwa Bleor.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his New Year message that the primary goal for 2022 would be to end the war in the country's east. The fighting, which started more than 7 years ago, has killed over 14,000 people and devastated Ukraine's industrial heartland known as Donbass. Russia seized Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula in 2014, and shortly after cast its support behind a separatist rebellion in the country's east.
We're not scared of any army on another side. No army on the other side of the border frightens us, because a great army on our side of the border protects us.
US President Joe Biden is due to hold talks with Zelensky after speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Biden spoke with Putin over the phone for almost an hour, addressing the Ukraine conflict among other key topics. Putin has pushed for Western guarantees preventing NATO's expansion to Ukraine, and the build-up could reflect an attempt to back up the message. Zelensky's remarks came amid high tensions between Moscow and the West over the troops build-up and Moscow's demands for broad security guarantees in Europe and Central Asia. Authorities in Kyiv have expressed concerns that Russia could invade Ukraine in the coming weeks. Zelensky said ending the war between Kyiv and Russia-backed separatist formations in parts of eastern Ukraine remains the main goal of his government, promising that next year will be better.
We can say we have returned Crimea to the global agenda, so that the day we can say we have returned Crimea to Ukraine. And it is important that all prisoners are returned.
The Ukrainian president expressed confidence that Crimean would one day be returned to Kyiv's control.
USA travel industry continue its overwhelming chaos that most travelers witnessed starting from last month and in these early days of the new year 2022. Thousands of flights were cancelled as bad weather and the spike of coronavirus were dominant in the country. Usama Yadi on Watch Follow.
Air travel continues to be severely disrupted in the United States, with bad weather in parts of the country adding to the impact of the surge in COVID-19 infections fueled by the Omicron variant. Airlines cancelled more than 2,600 U.S. flights on New Year's Day as they faced severe weather across the country and a surge in Omicron infections among the staff.
For me, my flight was cancelled from Seattle to Portland, so I did the next best thing and rented a car and white-knuckle drove down.
The issues won't be resolved anytime soon. By Saturday afternoon, the airlines had already cancelled more than 1,000 U.S. flights scheduled for Sunday. Since Christmas Eve, more than 13,700 U.S. flights have been scrapped and thousands more were delayed, according to flight tracking site FlightAware. The travel woes come during what airlines expected to be among the busiest days since the pandemic began. Last year, the Transportation Security Administration screened nearly 580 million people, up 79% from 2020, but still off about 30% from 2019 before the pandemic. The global air travel industry is still reeling from the highly contagious Omicron variant. Many pilots, flight attendants, and other staff are absent from work after contracting COVID-19 or because they are quarantining after coming in contact with someone who has the infection.
Mourners arrived this morning at St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town for the funeral service of the Archbishop Desmond Tutu, the last great hero in its struggle against apartheid, who died at the end of the last week, aged 19. Zara Ferjani.
The funeral mass for South African anti-apartheid leader Archbishop Desmond Tutu has taken place at the Anglican Cathedral in Cape Town. Tutu, a Nobel Peace Prize winner who helped end the racist regime in South Africa, died last Sunday, aged 90. President Cyril Ramaphosa described Desmond Tutu as the spiritual father of the new nation.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu was without question a crusader in the struggle for freedom, for justice, for equality and for peace, not only in South Africa, the country of his birth, but around the world as well.
Family, friends and politicians gathered at St. George's Cathedral for Saturday's service, which had limited numbers because of coronavirus restrictions.
Many of the messages we received have said, "Thank you for sharing him with the world." Well, it actually is a two-way street. Because we shared him with the world, you shared part of the love you held for him with us.
The loss of South Africa's well-known freedom fighters leave behind a difficult task for the leaders of the nation to clear the country of corruption and racial divisions and lead the way forward.
Thousands of people rallied in Baghdad to commemorate the second anniversary of the U.S. drone attack that killed a famous Iranian commander and his Iraqi lieutenant. The protesters chanted "Death to America" as they gathered in Baghdad Square to pay tribute to Iran General Qasem Soleimani.
Last year, Iran requested red notices from Interpol against scores of U.S. officials, including Trump, who was also wanted by an Iraqi court. The assassination of Soleimani pushed Iran and the U.S. to the brink of war. On Sunday, in a speech, Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who has pledged serious punishments for Soleimani, said that the assassins would be consigned to the dustbin of history. Iranian officials are organizing a series of festivities to commemorate the second anniversary of Soleimani's killing, including missile launches against U.S. facilities, where President Ibrahim Raisi and other senior personalities are likely to attend. Iran has urged the UN to take legal action against the US over the assassination of its top general, General Qasem Soleimani, commander of the elite Quds Force of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps 2 years ago. In a letter to the UN General Assembly, Iran's Presidential Legal Department urged for all legal actions within its power, including passing a resolution condemning the US administration and discouraging similar actions in the future. Iran claims that the commander of the elite Quds Force was on a diplomatic trip in Iraq's capital, Baghdad, when his convoy was hit by missiles launched by a US drone. And thousands of people gathered in Iraq to commemorate Soleimani's death.
Zionists conducted dozens of airstrikes on the Gaza Strip, claiming that Palestinian militants fired barrages of rockets at the southern Zionist cities. The pre-dawn raids on Gaza were some of the heaviest seen since the fighting began last week. Zionist entity said it has facilities belonging to militant group Hamas and several commanders' homes, but main roads and power lines were also damaged. However, there were on immediate reports that there was no casualties following the strikes. Due to recent alleged human rights breaches and coups, the U.S. suspended Ethiopia, Mali, and Guinea from duty-free trade program on Saturday. Islam Seed has more to be clarified.
3 African countries have been dropped from the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which means they will no longer be eligible for lower import tariffs. Ethiopia, Mali, and Guinea have been banned from a U.S.-Africa trade pact, according to U.S. Joe Biden's administration, because their conduct breached the agreement standards.
The United States today terminated Ethiopia, Mali, and Guinea from the AGOA Trade Preference Program due to actions taken by each of their governments in violation of the AGOA statute. The United States is deeply concerned by the unconstitutional change in governments in both Guinea and Mali.
The African Growth and Opportunity Act was enacted in 2000 by former President Bill Clinton's administration to aid and adjust trade between the U.S. and Africa. The U.S. Trade Representative also expressed worry over gross abuses of internationally recognized human rights perpetrated by the Ethiopian government and other parties within the escalating war in northern Ethiopia.
Each country has clear benchmarks for a pathway toward reinstatement, and the administration will work with their governments to achieve that objective.
Thousands of African items can benefit from lower import tariffs under the AGO agreement, provided that certain standards are met in terms of human rights, good governance, and worker protection, as well as not imposing a custom restriction on American products on their territory. According to the SDR website, 38 nations were eligible for the AGOA by 2020. The US Congress updated the agreement in 2015, and the program was extended through 2025.
Mali's interim authorities proposed to its West African neighbors that a transition back to democracy following the 2022 military coup be extended by 5 years. The foreign minister said its command in broadcast on Saturday. Provincial government first agreed 18 months after a Siam Guatta-led overthrow of President Ibrahim Boubacar. He will hold a presidential and legislative election in February 2022. Democratic politician Eric Adams was sworn in as mayor of New York City at Times Square party shortly after the country's largest city celebrated the New Year on Saturday. Adams, 61 years old, faces the formidable challenge of pulling the city out of the pandemic and take office as the city battled record numbers of COVID-19 cases, led by the Omicron mutant.
Eric Adams.
I, Eric Adams.
I, Eric Adams.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support the Constitution.
That I will support the Constitution.
Of the United States.
Of the United States.
The Constitution of the State of New York.
The Constitution of the State of New York.
And the Charter of the City.
And the Charter of the City.
Of New York.
Of New York.
And I will faithfully.
And I will faithfully.
Discharge the duties.
Discharge the duties.
Of the office.
Of the office.
Of the Mayor of the City of New York.
Of the Mayor of the City of New York.
According to the best of my ability.
To the best of my abilities.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations.
France has banned the use of plastic to package most fruits and vegetables and says that the new ban is expected to eliminate about 1 billion items of plastics waste per year. The measure comes as French President Emmanuel Macron introduced a slate of environment rules. Marim Zian.
To protect the environment in France, single-use plastics around some raw fruits and vegetables are officially prohibited starting from New Year's Day. Radish, apples, lemon, and oranges are among the 30 varieties banned from being wrapped in plastic. However, larger packs in chopped fruits will be exempted. The ban was dubbed a real revolution by President Emmanuel Macron, who claimed it demonstrated the country's steadfastness to phase out single-use plastics by 2040.
Pour sortir du plastique à usage unique.
To get out of a single-use plastic, we will be the first country. It must be said, we will be the first to no longer have plastic around our fruits and vegetables on January 1st.
À ne plus avoir de plastique autour de nos fruits, de nos légumes.
The Environment Ministry said in a statement announcing the new regulation that France uses a shameful amount of single-use plastics, and that the new prohibition aims to reduce the use of throwaway plastic and increase its replacement by other materials or reusable and recyclable packaging. And the Ministry of Economy's website states that it is no longer legal to manufacture non-biodegradable plastic tea and herbal tea bags, as well as plastic bags that cover newspapers and adverts, and plastic toys on fast food menus. The exhaustive list of measures and bans in France comes as efforts to preserve and protect the environment.
Due to the fires that devastate many areas in Colorado, searching campaigns are still on duty, where according to officials, 3 people is believed to be dead and hundreds of homes destroyed, as Biden declares a national disaster. Islam Seed on What Follow clarifies.
According to authorities, 3 people are missing and suspicions about being dead after a wind-stoked wildfire rode through 2 towns in Boulder County, Colorado, pushing many people to evacuate, where around 1,000 homes were destroyed by the fires. No reports of fatalities or missing residents were reported following the rare urban wildfire that erupted Thursday morning on the northern outskirts of the Denver metropolitan area. Winds in a speed of 160 kilometers per hour pushed flames east into the towns of Superior and Louisville, prompting the evacuation of both communities. Boulder County Sheriff Joe Pilley said the 3 missing people all lived in homes that were destroyed by the blaze.
The structures where these folks would be are completely destroyed and covered with about 8 inches of snow. Dogs will be deployed on Sunday to search the dwelling for the corpse.
Pelley stated that 991 homes in Superior Louisville and in separate parts of the county have been devastated, making it the most destructive wildfire in state history in terms of residences lost. Becky Bollinger, assistant state climatologist at Colorado State University's Climate Center, stated on her Twitter page that grasses were aided to thrive by a wet spring in 2021.
It's not just the weather happening today. The ingredients for a devastating wildfire have been coming together since last spring. A very wet spring 2021 helped grow the grasses. A very dry summer and fall dried the grasses out and prepared the kindling.
Officials have reported the fire may have been started by sparks from the downed power lines, collapsed by gale force winds. Detectives are looking into all possibilities to figure out what might cause the fire. According to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, U.S. President Joe Biden has designated the situation as a national disaster, freeing up federal money to assist affected people and companies in recovery operations.
China has officially reopened its embassy in Nicaragua 3 weeks after the latter severed ties with Taiwan and recognized Chinese sovereignty over it. Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Denis Moncada welcomed the Chinese decision, stressing that the importance of cooperation between the two countries must start again. Sudanese security forces deployed in large numbers Sunday, setting up roadblocks in the capital Khartoum amid calls for pro-democracy rallies in memory of the martyrs killed in recent protests. Zara Furjani clarified.
Security forces fired tear gas at anti-military protesters in Sudan's capital Khartoum as demonstrators marched toward the presidential palace in the 12th round of major protests since a coup on October 25th. All bridges directly connecting to Khartoum were closed. Moreover, the internet service on mobile phone was interrupted across the country ahead of planned protests against military rule. The demonstrations have continued even after Abdullah Hamdouk was reinstated as prime minister last month. The protesters have demanded the military play no role in government during a transition to free elections. Sudan has been suffering a political crisis after General Commander of the Sudanese Armed Forces declared a state of emergency and dissolved the Sovereign Council and government.
Disputes over power and the loss of lives means everyone should use the voice of reason. The only way to rule is by popular mandate through elections.
Sudan's Sovereign Council, which Al-Burhan leads, ordered authorities to take all legal military measures to avoid a recurrence.
Rows and tension between Britain and the rest of countries in Europe have been a clear sign of complicated post-Brexit period in Europe, as many complications appeared on the scene on diplomacy level and, most importantly, on the economical level.
2021 is the first year for the United Kingdom to operate apart from the European Union. Brexit was the last step taken by the British government towards the European Union, as Boris Johnson worked on tracing new diplomacy borders for his country with the rest of the continent. Many complaints appeared in the United Kingdom after the last decision. This included the new immigration rules in the country, and most businesses suffered, which relied on the freedom of movement of EU workers before Brexit.
Restricting free movement has had a devastating impact, but not just on horticulture or agriculture, on pretty much every sector where people from abroad have been working in those sectors for years, and now they're going home.
Staff is a serious issue for Britain since the spike of coronavirus around the world, and Brexit has made things more difficult for all sectors, including agriculture, hospitality, transportation, and a list of other sectors which build the economy of Britain.
Biggest issue is staff. We would have had 100, 150 people today picking, and it's just down to, 25 now.
For us, it's been very traumatic because of the absolute acute staff shortages, and it has been really hard with deliveries.
Trade is one more issue for Great Britain, as the British government has repeatedly delayed implementing many controls on EU imports, while the EU immediately implemented border controls last January after the Brexit transition period expired, but that is likely to change. The further red tapes that Britain will implement on the rest of countries in the continent are risky measures that will result in price soar and further complicate matters in terms of trade for both sides, especially that London and Brussels have clashed repeatedly over issues ranging from trade in Northern Ireland to coronavirus vaccines. Post-Brexit period does not appear as a smooth period for both sides over Europe, which will surely affect the economy as well as diplomacy.
The Turkish lira ended 2021 by losing 44% of its value against the US dollar, 19% in the last week of the year alone, and tumbled from 18.4 to 10.25, recovering slightly to end the year at the 13.19 on Friday. This was lira's worst performance since President Recep Tayyip Erdogan came to power nearly 20 years ago. Erdogan announced a plan in December to protect convertible local deposits from losses against hard currencies. We saw a sharp but brief 50% rally in the lira on support from the central bank. The latest international news in this roundup by Marwa Blauer.
Tunisia has launched a wide-ranging national consultation process that will help in drafting a new constitution, part of a reform package pushed by President Kais Saied, who is seeking to bolster his authority. The exercise called on citizens to send suggestions through electronic platform from January 1st to March 20th. The constitutional referendum is planned for July 25th, exactly a year after Saied sacked the government, suspended parliament, and seized wide-ranging powers. The head of the military junta in Chad set Friday for February 15th the start of the Inclusive National Dialogue, supposed to reconcile the Chadians and lead the presidential and legislative elections during his first televised vows at the head of the country. Mohamed Idriss Deby promised a dialogue without taboos and sovereign, which will begin on February 15, 2022, and whose conclusions will be fully enforceable. A new constitution will be adopted by referendum, and general, transparent, free, credible, and democratic elections will be organized. At the end of the dialogue, Mohammed added. Germany has pulled the plug on 3 of its last 6 nuclear power stations as it moves towards completing its withdrawal from nuclear power as it turns its focus to renewables. The government decided to speed up the phasing out of nuclear power following Japan's Fukushima reactor meltdown in 2011, when an earthquake and tsunami destroyed the coastal plant in the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl in 1986. The last 3 nuclear power will be turned off by the end of 2022. The European Union has drawn plans to label some natural gas and nuclear energy projects as green investments after a year-long battle between governments over which investments are truly climate-friendly. The European Commission is expected to propose rules in January deciding whether gas and nuclear projects will be included in the EU Sustainable Finance Taxonomy. By restricting the green label to truly climate-friendly projects, the system aims to make those investments more attractive to private capital and stop greenwashing, where companies or investors overstate their eco-friendly credentials.
Away from the international news and within the economic sector, a word report by Nabil Khazini in this paper.
ExxonMobil Corporation was granted another oil loan from the U.S. strategic reserves under President Joe Biden's effort to ease pain at the gasoline pump. Exxon was awarded 2 million barrels as part of the crude exchange program announced in November, after gasoline prices touched a 7-year high. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, the latest grant brings the total awarded to date to 7 million barrels, or 22% of the maximum amount on offer of 32 million. Tens of thousands of people woke up on Christmas Day to doubled wages and a higher-than-expected bank balance after Santander Bank mistakenly made a deposit of $176 million into accounts held by its UK customers. The bank confirmed that some payments were accidentally doubled and it would now like the money to be brought back. Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei announced it expects revenue for this year will come in at $99 billion. This makes a 28.9% drop from a year ago. Huawei has been caught in the crossfire of a US-China trade and technology rivalry after the administration of former President Donald Trump moved to break the company over concerns it could pose a cybersecurity and espionage threat. Prices of household electricity and natural gas in Turkey raised amid the surge in global energy prices. The cost of electricity will soar as much as 130% for some households, while natural gas price jumped 25% for residential use and 50% for industrial use in January.
2021 was a busy year in space exploration and technologies, with the global superpowers and the mega region ducking it out for mastery of the cosmos. Here are some of the most highlights from the year 2021. Marwa Blayawar again.
The Russian multipurpose laboratory module Nuka docked with the International Space Station in July. After 14 years of delays, the long-awaited launch was followed by some issues. After an accidental firing of the module's thrusters sent the ISS into spin. Months later, another Russian module hooked up with the Nuka. This time the coupling went off without a hitch. NASA's Perseverance rover touched down on Martian soil in February. Perseverance is the fifth American rover to score the surface of Mars. Within days of landing, it kicked off a first-in-space exploration when its attached Ingenuity helicopter took off, providing that controlled flight is possible in Mars' atmosphere. China landed its Taiwan-1 rover on Mars in May. Taiwan-1 is China's first vehicle to drive on Mars, and its having done solidified Beijing's entry into the top tier of space explorers. Reacting to the successful landing, NASA chief Bill Nelson called China a very energetic opponent in what is shaping up to be the space race of the 21st century. The Russian Defense Ministry confirmed in November that it had destroyed a Soviet-era investigation satellite with a precision missile strike. While the satellite was quietly destroyed outside the planet's atmosphere, the political shockwaves back on Earth were loud and immediate. However, Russia alone is not driving the competition to develop space weaponry, and the US, China, and India have all tested anti-satellite missiles in the past. After becoming the first private company to send humans into orbit in 2022, Elon Musk's SpaceX continued checking off a list of firsts in 2022. It sent a record of 143 satellites into space on a single mission in January, launched the first crewed flight on a reused space capsule in April, and in September once again made history with the launch of the first all-civilian crew into orbit. This summer, however, all eyes were on Musk's fellow billionaires Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson. Both flew to the edge of space, a broad craft built by their companies, blasting off within weeks of each other, although neither magnate actually entered the orbit. The most powerful space telescope ever built took off from the European Space Agency's launch base in France, Guiana. The 10 billion James Webb Space Telescope is 100 times more sensitive than the Hubble Space Telescope. While the telescope is being hyped as significantly more powerful than Hubble, it won't serve as a complete replacement to the 3-decade-old orbital tool producing mind-blowing multicolored images of deep space. On reaching its destination at the second Sun-Earth language point L2, a million miles away from Earth, the James Webb Telescope will begin scoring the infrared for science of the first stars and galaxies formed after the Big Bang. As a plus, the powerful new tool will allow scientists to peer into the atmospheric composition of exoplanets, aiding the search for Earth-like planets that may harbor life.
Moving on now to sport, Pep Guardiola's side fell behind this time for only 45 minutes when Bakayos calls for the Gunners to take the lead. However, the game was turned upside down during a 7 chaotic second half minutes, with Riyad Mahrez converted a 57 minutes penalty to level things up. A stoppage time goal from Rodrigo ensured Manchester City beat 10-man Arsenal in a lively encounter to go 11 points clear at the top of the Premier League. And just right after the game, Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola praised his player for showing character despite being low on energy, but admitted that Arsenal were better in the Stadium of Emirates. Let's have a listen.
Congratulations. They were better. We face a team like in the last years struggled to be in the top 4, and they start this season being in the bottom. And they are in top 4, and they have 6-7 days after the last game for Norwich. We have 2 days and a half, and Brentford was so tough. Come back to Manchester, come back, and we didn't have energy.
To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. Positive test rate in Australia hits 20% high as Omicron cases surge. Hospitalization climb for more than 1,000 in New South Wales for first time since Omicron variant emerged as number of PCR tests drops down. A major fire broke out at South Africa's Seat of Parliament in Cape Town early Sunday, sending a thick column of smoke into the sky and threatening the National Assembly building. Flooding in Oman triggered by heavy rainfall that began on New Year's Eve has killed 6 people and left several towns completely cut off. Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has said in his new message that he wants to see an end to the conflict in the east of the country. Our news comes to a close. Thank you so much for keeping with us, watching the Al24 News. Enjoy the rest of our program. Stay tuned for the French News Bulletin at 7 p.m. Have a blessed evening.